It might not seem obvious to the casual fan, but in competitive Pokemon, a Pokemon's item can make or break everything. You don't just have an Urshifu game plan, you need to have a different game plan for if the Urshifu is Choice Scarf and fast, if it's Mystic Water doing more damage, or if it's Focus Sash and able to take an extra hit. Today, we're going to look at how those items impact competitive Pokemon, specifically how one new item in Game Freak's new philosophy around designing held items is going to completely warp the way we play competitive Pokemon, at least until the end of Scarlet and Violet. To start, let's take a look at two new held items in Scarlet and Violet that encapsulate this shifting philosophy. First, we have Covert Cloak. This item prevents the secondary effects of your opponent's moves from working on you. The secondary effect is essentially a bonus effect on a move that does damage. If it does damage and something else to you, that something else will normally be ignored. That means you can't be flinched by Fake Out or Rock Slide, have your speed dropped by Icy Wind, or have your Pokemon randomly burned by Flare Blitz or frozen by Ice Beam. This item is pretty multifaceted. It's often used on Trick Room or Tailwind Setter Pokemon, like Whimsicott, to stop your opponents from delaying your speed control with Fake Out. It also occasionally gets used on Pokemon like Hatterene to prevent Snarl from lowering your special attack stat, guaranteeing you can sweep. Our other new item is Clear Amulet. This item prevents your opponents from lowering the holder's stats. This includes things like stopping Intimidate attack drops, Icy Wind speed drops, and so on. This item is really strong, but hasn't been super popular, at least not until recently, for reasons we'll get into soon. So, what do these two new items, Clear Amulet and Covert Cloak, have in common? Well, they're both meant to stop your opponent from disrupting your game plan. By using one of these two items, you're saying that your Pokemon as it is good enough. You're willing to commit your item slot to make sure that your opponent's tools to stop your Pokemon from doing its thing just won't work. But you might be saying to yourself, well, scraw, items like this that generally prevent your opponent from messing with you have existed for a long time, like White Herb, Mental Herb, Lumberry, and But there's a big difference between those items and the ones that I'm talking about now. Namely, that White Herb, Mental Herb, and Lumberry are all one-time use items. A Lumberry does not stop me from ever burning you. It just means that I'll have to status you once to get rid of the item, and then do it again to make sure it actually sticks. White Herb doesn't mean that I can never drop your stats. It just means I'm gonna have to do it twice. In the case of these items, I am disrupting your disruption, forcing you to do something inefficient if you want to do something powerful to me down the line. This is not the case with Covert Cloak or Clear Amulet. I am not slowing down your ability to interact with my Pokemon on a specific axis, I am completely shutting it down. This isn't entirely new. After all, the item Safety Goggles has been around for a while, and it just completely shuts down Powder Move's ability to affect the holder. But this item was targeted specifically at dealing with Amoonguss, a historically extremely powerful, and to some people, extremely unfun to play against Pokemon. And it has much less broad application than our two new contenders. Safety Goggles makes you immune to a total of 8 moves, of which you could only expect to see maybe 4 of them, but mostly just 2. That's a lot less times Safety Goggles is going to come up than either Covert Cloak or Clear Amulet, and the power level of these items has been reflected in their success. Covert Cloak has been a consistently extremely powerful item on Pokemon like Tornadus and Whimsicott, like we discussed. Clear Amulet has seen a little bit less play so far, because offensive Pokemon often want an item to help boost their damage to get an important knockout, or have something to help them survive some crucial hit. So, only extremely powerful, well-rounded Pokemon like Garchomp or Iron Hands have used it to see any real success so far, but even then, it wasn't the most popular item on either of those Pokemon. But that's drastically changed in the last month or so. Remember when I said Covert Cloak and Clear Amulet are good for Pokemon that are already good enough at their jobs? That you use them when a Pokemon will get it done, assuming you don't mess with them? Well, at the start of May, we were introduced to Regulation G, a new format that allows you to play exactly one extremely powerful restricted Pokemon on your team. Restricteds are Pokemon like Kyogre, Groudon, and Rayquaza. Basically the guys you get on the box of your game, plus some additional Pokemon like Calyrex and Terapagos. As you can imagine, the best way to play this format is to pick which restricted you think is best, then build your entire team around supporting it as well as possible. As a result, games of VGC have become centralized around 2 things. Number 1, getting as much value out of your restricted as possible, and number 2, stopping your opponent from doing the same. Now, a lot of powerful restricted Pokemon like Groudon, Koraidon, and Calyrex Ice Rider are physical attackers, so historically, the best way to deal with these powerful punks would be to intimidate them, with Pokemon like Old Reliable Incineroar. But the fact of the matter is, these absolutely busted Pokemon are exactly the type of Pokemon that love Covert Cloak and Clear Amulet. They're already so good at doing what they want to do, with nearly perfect stat spreads to fill their roles, that you'd rather spend your item to make sure that they can keep doing their thing, rather than using it to make them do something stronger a lot of the time. So, the solution is simple. I need to make sure Incineroar doesn't slow me down with Intimidate, I don't need an item to do enough damage to sweep through my opponents or to live their hits, so boom, Clear Amulet it is. In fact, the only physical restricteds that don't run Clear Amulet 99% of the time are Zacian and Zamazenta, because they need a special held item to to enter their crowned forms. Now, since Zamazenta uses its defense stat for its primary attack, this hasn't been a problem. In fact, it's been very successful. But being forced to hold Rusted Sword to enter its crowned form may be exactly why Zacian has been struggling a little bit compared to other physical restricteds, because he's still liable to be intimidated. Now, you might be saying, Scroll,
why are you framing this like it's a bad thing? Incineroar is stupidly broken, and maybe it's okay for things to make it a little harder for this stupid cat.
Well, Incineroar is broken, sure, and yeah, it's everywhere. However, Incineroar is first and foremost a support Pokemon. You will not win the game by sweeping through your opponent's whole team with your Incineroar. Rather, you use it to try and slow your opponents down. If you want to learn more about Incineroar, boom, other video. But in a nutshell, support Pokemon like Incineroar being everywhere isn't nearly as unhealthy for the game as oppressive sweeping offensive Pokemon being at the tippity top. Koraidon and Calyrex Ice Rider, for example, on the other hand, aren't trying to create cute board states and disrupt your opponent's game plans. Instead, they're trying to disrupt your opponent's ability to be alive, slamming crazy sun-boosted flare blitzes or chucking huge glacial lances at your opponent. And taking away your opponent's strongest way to disrupt these powerful attacks is troubling. If we take a look at Regulation G so far, we all assumed that the most powerful restricteds going in would be the two Calyrexes. After all, they are both oppressively powerful with crazy stats and absurdly broken spread moves, Astro Barrage and Glacial Lance. But up until the Los Angeles Regional Championship, 4 majors into Regulation G, Calyrex Shadow Rider struggled to break through even into a single top 8. This is likely because people were jamming their teams full of Pokemon that hard counter Calyrex Shadow Rider. Lots of normal types immune to Astro Barrage, wide guard Pokemon to block Astro Barrage, Assault Vests on Pokemon like Tinglu and Raging Bolt to mitigate damage from Astro Barrage. Calyrex Shadow Rider kind of had to wait for the target on its back to go away before it could sneak in a win in the hands of Montana Mott. So why didn't people try to do something similar to Calyrex Ice Rider if we knew it was going to be just as good, if not better, than Calyrex Shadow Rider? Well, they tried. With access to Clear Amulet and a spread attacking move that doesn't have immunities the way Astro Barrage does, the amount of options to mitigate Calyrex Ice Rider's damage got greatly reduced. You could try to burn it with Will-O-Wisp, use Wide Guard to stop Glacial Lance, try to set up Reflect, or use a Pokemon that resists hits, but good luck trying to find a Pokemon that can take both Glacial Lance and High Horsepower, and that's really all the simple counterplay. Clear Amulet just stops the most obvious answer of just, trying to lower its attack. Because Clear Amulet cuts off the most reliable and non-committal axis you would use to stop Calyrex Ice Rider and leaves you with only a few options, it becomes a lot easier for the Calyrex Ice Rider player to pick partners for their horse that beats the few counters that are left. This has allowed Calyrex Ice Rider to remain a top restricted despite everyone knowing how popular and powerful it would be. In fact, at time of writing, Calyrex Ice Rider is the only restricted to have top cut every Regulation G regional. Despite the target on its back, Clear Amulet has made Calyrex Ice Rider hard enough to counter that he just keeps sticking around no matter how hard we try. And the Calyrex Ice Rider isn't the only Pokemon to take great advantage of Clear Amulet. As I mentioned earlier, Koraidon also loves this item. It may even be better on Koraidon, honestly, because it already wants to Terra into the Fire type to get Terra Fire Sun-boosted Flare Blitzes, which also naturally makes it immune to Will-O-Wisp. And Koraidon also benefits from Clear Amulet, making it immune to speed drops from Icy Wind and Electro Web, making it super good at winning the speed control wars that these restricted formats often turn into. And while Clear Amulet is finally getting its time in the sun, players are also still running Cobra Cloak like crazy too, often still on supportive Pokemon like Tornadus, but also on their restricted, where it's popular on setup special attacking restricteds like Calyrex Shadow Rider and Terapagos. So there you have it. With the introduction of Clear Amulet, physical attackers are suddenly way harder to mitigate, and when the physical attackers are as strong as they are now, that could be a problem. But maybe I'm just an Incineroar fanboy and the nerf to the silly tiger is actually a good thing. Let me know what you think in the comments. Thanks, and bye.